Hi everyone, Fox is here and welcome to my weekly wrap-up. So this is going to be the wrap-up for the week between March 19th and March 25th. And I have just a couple of things to show you. So without further ado, let's just get started. So the first book that I would like to talk about is actually an audiobook, and I finished it the week before. So the previous week was the week of Read-A-Rama Readathon, and I finished that audiobook, and since I did not include it in my weekly wrap-up for the Readathon, I'm including that now. But as a matter of fact, I finished it on March 12th. However, that was The Valley of Fear by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and that was an audiobook. I really enjoy reading Sherlock Holmes, especially listening to audiobooks, and I've listened to quite a few audiobooks by different narrators. In this case, The Valley of Fear was narrated by Sir Ian McKellen, who does an amazing job. As you know, Sir Ian McKellen is one of the best actors of nowadays. The Valley of Fear is actually a novel, not a short story. It's one of the 4 novels about Sherlock Holmes, and it's not my favorite, to be honest. Valley of Fear has like 2 distinctive parts, one of them being the investigation itself, another one is some sort of a flashback. Basically, when the culprit is apprehended, he tells the story of his life and how everything led to where he was, and that is not my favorite thing because it goes back to America and what happened in America and a secret society. In some ways, this 2-part system is very reminiscent of the Study in Scarlet, because this is the type of story that we have here. I did enjoy the first part, and even though it was kind of slow, but I did enjoy it. The second part, like I said, not my favorite story. That's why I gave this story itself 3 stars. However, Sir Ian McKellen does a very good job when it comes to voicing, and he's an amazing narrator. So when you listen to him, you can definitely get into the story. But when it comes to performance, I would still give it only 4 stars, and reason for that being because of the nature of his voice, and he has a very deep, gruffy voice. The voices that he does for Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, and also investigators and other characters are not that different. They're very similar in many ways. That's why while listening to an audiobook, I was thinking more of just like a single narrator as opposed to having someone who does voices, you know, like a full-fledged performance. I still enjoyed it. It's a great audiobook. I mean, if you love audiobooks and if you love Sir Ian McKellen and if you love Sherlock Holmes, it's definitely something that you should check out. However, like I said, not my favorite thing, not my favorite type of story. But since I'm talking about Sherlock Holmes, I just want to mention that first of all, there is a new edition of all Sherlock Holmes stories as read by Stephen Fry, and this is something which is on my wish list at Audible, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it. I'm just waiting on the next credit that I get with Audible, and I'm just jumping straight ahead, and I want to start listening to that because Stephen Fry was someone whose narration of Harry Potter books got me back into audiobooks all those years ago. It was, I think, about 10 years, maybe more than 10 years ago now. And because of that, I have like a particular fondness when it comes to Stephen Fry. And when I learned that he narrated the whole cycle, like all series, all books, all short stories about Sherlock Holmes, I was like, oh my god, I'm going crazy. I need it right now. That's why I'm super excited. And that one, The Valley of Fear, was kind of like my first venture back into Sherlock Holmes audiobooks. So yeah, super excited. Like I said, performance 4 stars, the story itself 3 stars. I didn't have much time to read this past week, so I am still in the process of a couple of books. However, I did finish one complete novel, and I'm going to talk about it a bit later. But for now, I want to talk about one novella that I read, and that is Burn by Sophie Carlon. I mentioned Sophie in my previous video because I read her 2 issues of Ceremony for my Read-A-Rama readathon, and this is the novel. Well, it tended to be a novel, but it's actually the size of novella, Burn, that she wrote a couple of months ago. I mean, I think she wrote it basically last year, or maybe even the year before. I'm not really sure, I'm so sorry. But she finally finished it and decided to get it self-published, and I got it in January, or it might have arrived in February. God, I'm so high on coffee, I don't remember things. Anyway, I finally got a chance to read it, and I really enjoyed it. I knew that Sophie loves magical realism and that Burn would be about a man who's burning from inside, quite literally burning from inside. And I knew that, like, when it comes to magical realism, I would probably like it. But I did not expect to like it as much as I did, and the reason for that being because since I have already read short stories by Sophie, and I read her 2 issues of Ceremony, which I did enjoy, but I felt that they all had this sort of unfinished flavor to it, while Burn actually has a very fleshed out, if we can say so, about a magical realism, rather fleshed out storyline and a very distinctive beginning and ending. I don't know if you can hear that, but I live close to St. Michael's Church, and there are bells ringing on it, which means it's 9 p.m. and it's almost my bedtime. Well, folks, if you wonder how I find out time in my apartment, that's how. Bells on the church. I'm so medieval. Anyway, back to the story. I loved Burn. I loved it. I read it in one sitting because it's super short, as you can tell. It was very engaging. I do feel that the story could have benefited from an additional editing, not in terms of the language, but more like typing and spelling. However, it was a very well written story, and I know that Sophie spent a lot of time working on it, and you can tell that because it is really, really well fleshed out, and I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it, and even though there was one small twist that I did not foresee, and I loved it, and I basically gave the story 4 stars. I'm not giving it 5 stars only because I know that Sophie is just starting publishing her works, and there is so much ahead of her, and she can do even better, and that's why it's 4 stars. It's not 5 stars, even though in my heart I would love to give it 5 stars, but I really enjoyed it. Well done. I'm so happy that I have it. And actually, this cover, I think this cover is really pretty. I know that she has like magic editing skills, so that definitely helped. But yeah, I'm going to provide the link to Sophie's website, to her store, and also her YouTube channel, so please check her out. Oh, did I tell you guys that she's Australian? Yeah, she totally is, and she's awesome, and her accent is sexy. Just saying. And the last book that I read and finished this past week was Blood of Wonderland by Colleen Oakes, and this is book number 2 in her Queen of Hearts saga, I believe she calls it. Woo. So where do I start? First of all, I read Queen of Hearts a year ago, and it was not my favorite book whatsoever. I gave it 2 stars, and I was very critical. If I find the link to my video review of that book, I will provide it down below if you're interested. Basically, this is a story of Queen of Hearts as a kid. The book number 1 starts with our protagonist. Her name is Dina, as a small kid, and then she grows up to a teenager. She has a very cruel and unloving father, King of Hearts, and basically this is the story of how Queen of Hearts became to be who she is. This is definitely a retelling, as you can tell, and the book number 1 was very disappointing in many ways, mostly because of very simple writing style and very simple language. It is so simple that, in fact, I even said in my previous review, and this also applies to this book as well, that while reading it, I had a feeling as if it was a middle grade novel instead of young adult, and it is positioned as young adult novel. Book number 2 unfortunately falls prey to the same stylistic issues as book number 1. It is very simplistic. There is a lot of scenes in which the author is telling us things instead of showing them. There are a lot of unnecessary flashbacks and memories, and I'm not saying a flashback in the sense that, oh, here is the character who lies on bed and kind of dreams about things that happened before, but this is just the stylistic way of telling us things. For example, when we see the character who is struggling, is traveling somewhere. I'm trying to avoid spoilers because in case you just want to read this book or read the series. So imagine the character is traveling somewhere, and we know that a couple of months passed between chapters. We're not told what happened in between those chapters, but something significant has happened, which means that it has to be shown somehow in the book. But instead of showing us, the author decides to actually retell what happened, not even through conversation, but through basically thoughts of the character, that the character just thinks, oh, this is what happened in those past 2-3 months. Which for me, and I apologize for such a criticism, but for me it's just laziness. And the author can pretty much take any path when it comes to storytelling. You can tell the story from the first point of view, you can tell the story from the third point of view, you can tell the story through dreams, through visions. You can do whatever you want. However, when it comes to straight narratives, when we have just something like a story progresses in a straight line from the past to the future, I hope I'm making sense here, we should have some sort of development, and there is no development in this book because pretty much half of the book, and I'm talking about this second novel here, half of the book is our main protagonist basically wandering through the forest, and the second half is her getting ready to go back to Wonderland. And there is so much stuff, important stuff that happens in between those small things, but that important stuff is mostly told from the character's memories instead of actually showing us what's going on. Some things are shown, and some parts of the novel are written pretty well. However, I think that if you take this novel, and it's about 320 pages, like say 300 pages, you could have condensed this whole thing into 50 pages and not lose anything, or maybe 100 pages. So this book sort of feels redundant. I'm pretty sure that when we get the third novel, it will suffer from the same stylistic devices. Let's call it a stylistic device here. And that's why I feel that by the end of the time this saga or this trilogy is done, you could probably take all 3 novels and rewrite them, just condense them into one novel. And this makes me really sad because this book and this plot line and this whole idea of retelling, not really retelling Alice in Wonderland, but retelling the world of Alice in Wonderland, the Wonderland itself, from the perspective of a young Queen of Hearts, it has a lot of potential, but this potential is not realized. I'm sorry, it's just I think I liked this book slightly more than book number 1 because book number 1 had a lot of plot holes. This one also has a bit of plot holes. There are certain things that I looked at while I was reading, and I was just rolling my eyes because some things were just so illogical and so glaringly obvious that I don't even know how the author could have missed that. Either it's done on purpose, or it's just, maybe it's editor's mistake. I don't know, like honestly I don't know. So to put it short, very little character development, Very little logic when it comes to characters' actions and what is happening. A lot of plot holes. The language is mostly simplistic with some bursts of creative flourishes. Some of them sound pretty artificial to me. I was not a fan of anything. However, this book is slightly better than book number 1. So I'm willing to give it 2.5 stars as opposed to 2 stars, but still, it's still kind of a disappointment. We'll see how it goes in book number 3. I think it comes out later this year, which is a bit surprising because book number 1 came out last year. This book came out in January of this year, and the last book comes out, I think, in September of this year. So these are very small gaps between books in the series. So yeah, maybe that explains the writing style. So yeah, I'm sorry if you liked this book, but personally, for me, it was a super easy read. It was something that I could read, say, on public transit while going somewhere without, you know, being too involved into the story, because it's such an easy read. But for me, it's also a bit of a disappointment because the story could have been so much better. So yeah, 2.5 stars if I'm being generous. Well, this is it. This is all I have read in the past week. And even though it was a pretty slow reading week for me, I still managed to read something. And I'm also almost done with one audiobook, and I'm about 1/4 into one book on my Kindle. Hopefully I will be able to start another novel very soon. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm back into reading and weekly wrap-ups, and this makes me really happy. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye! Hi everyone, Fox is here, and weekly... I've had so many coffees today, it's ridiculous. Like 2 ventis in the morning, and I'm filming this around 9 p.m. and I've had 3 coffees in the past couple of hours.